Here.
Very good. Is this a red light? Where should it be on?
It should be in the middle position.
In the middle position. Hey, look. I'm going to share this video.
Sounds great.
The chat is ready to display messages.
All right. Oh, it's a little crooked, but...
Is it?
It's just a little, you look at the bookshelves and it can be like...
Where should it be on?
It should be in the middle position.
All right, let me go to my page.
All right.
The chat is ready to display messages.
You're going to have to turn that off.
Done. We're set up now.
No background music, but here we are. Function. No sound on my computer anymore.
Casey McConnell's watching with you.
That's so cool. Thanks for tuning in today, Casey.
Hey, Mr. Sam Thompson has joined.
Hey! Sam said he was very excited about our show today.
Is there a difference between somebody who's watching with you and somebody who has joined?
I have no idea.
Michael Opal is
Mike
waving.
Opal!
He's waving hi.
Hi. If only the wave hi, there was an easier to find wave hi button,
Yeah.
Facebook has recently added, in light news, in this time of crisis, Facebook has recently added an additional emoji to the 6 emoji spread. You can do the thumbs up, the heart, the angry face, the sad face, and the laugh face. Now you can do a cares face. So like somebody posts that they're having a hard time.
Hard day.
Instead of putting a heart on it, because you kind of feel like a jerk, you can
Or if you like it.
Yeah. Yay, you're having a hard day. You can put a cares emoji, which is a smiley face hugging a heart. So it's like a way to easily send encouraging thoughts and attention to a loved one that's struggling. And I want to know how long until we get the barf button, because I really, really want there to be a barf emoji.
There's not?
There's an emoji, but you can't react to a post with barf. So when somebody posts something about your favorite love to hate political candidate,
right,
you don't get to hit the barf button.
You can't do the barf button?
Yeah. Unfortunately.
Is that on?
Now it is. And it pointed mostly towards me this time.
That's good.
In other light news, what was the other light news? You had a little bit of news to share with people. Joggers.
Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy, a show about changing your minds.
Our minds.
An outpost in the borderlands. I am your co-host, Citizen DJ Dark Sevier.
And I am the other co-host, Red-Handed Jill. The DJ formerly known as Red-Handed Jill. We have gotten word from the station manager that he's working with local health officials to reopen the station. So shortly, with safety procedures in place, DJs will begin to come back and produce their shows live on air again.
Live on air.
We don't know when it will be, but it's in the works. So if you know any kids in Butte that might want to be on the radio and play their music for their town, get in touch with me, because I will be looking for co-hosts for the Jolly Roger, which is my kids talk radio show.
Right. If you're watching with us live right now on Facebook, Twitch, or YouTube, you're watching us live. And if you are listening to us on the radio, you're listening to last week.
Right.
Both is happening simultaneously.
These people who are with us today won't know.
You can hear this show on the radio next week.
In the same slot.
So that's what's going on. Mm-hmm. So when people say we listen to today's show, we have to say which one, because they're both operating in parallel universes at the same time.
We're in multiple places
completely different content.
And completely different audiences, too. We have people who really just prefer to listen to us on the radio, and so that's kind of exciting, thinking about what will they say when they hear about it next week,
Right.
Tom Lazari says, hey, guys.
Hi, Tom.
Z.
Hi, Tom, with a...
Lazari with a Z and guys with a Z.
Lazari.
Oops.
We're in Butte.
Oops.
When I was in
Lazari.
When I was in Hawaii, there was a name. How would you pronounce the name? Rodrigues.
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez is the way they would say.
I couldn't visualize the letters well enough.
Rodriguez.
Rodriguez. Yes.
That's how they would pronounce it in Los Angeles. In Hawaii, it's pronounced Rodrigues.
No way.
Totally Rodrigues.
Ouch.
Portuguese.
It hurts me.
So, Tom, the family name in Butte is
Lazari.
Not Lazari.
Lazari.
So, yeah, thanks for joining the show, Tom.
Dang it. Rodrigues.
That's
No.
Yes.
No.
It's happening right now.
No.
Somebody is a Rodrigues right now in Honolulu.
Mr. Rodrigues, are you having a good day?
Yeah.
Well, gosh. Will you share your little bit of light news? I shared my bit of light news about the emoji that Facebook is adding. They're rolling it out. You'll have it soon.
Yes. We've taken a step aside from covering the coronavirus as all sources have sort of multiplied into oblivion, and good luck finding good information anymore. But I like the new fight that's going on. Like every week it's a new enemy. This week it's joggers and bicyclists.
People need to not feel impotent, so they have to have somebody to be mad at about the coronavirus.
So apparently from the flyer on the poll, the east side of New York has called out all the hipster douchebags for riding their bicycle and jogging without a mask, endangering the entire neighborhood as they breathe down the road.
Oh my!
So now there's a magazine. There's articles saying no, people walking down the road without a mask are not endangering your life.
Let's look at the science.
And geez, we should just give both equal weight, right? People's heartfelt opinions about what those people are doing and the science of it. They both need their day in court, don't they? Shouldn't we listen to both?
I think
both sides.
We should listen to everyone, and then we should figure out how to not be jerks to each other. And if there's science that says, guess what, you don't have to be a jerk to joggers to help you feel better about how you can't protect your family from coronavirus, that seems like good science.
Right.
I know that you want to feel like you have somebody to be mad at so that it feels like you're doing something to protect your family from the coronavirus.
Isn't Trump enough?
But you can't protect your family from the coronavirus.
Can't you just put all your anger into Trump? Most
Everybody's already doing that.
Yeah,
all the cool kids are just hating Trump even though there are tons of other people who are actually responsible. Why don't you just get on board?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we have about 11 people watching with us this afternoon right now.
Hi, welcome to the show, folks.
Welcome to the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We have a really fun, sensational topic this afternoon.
Drugs.
Drugs.
We're going to talk about drugs. More pointedly, we're going to talk about drug policy and how that shapes reality for everybody in the society.
Yes, we are not going to be talking hardly at all about our personal experiences with substances, legal or illegal. That's not the point of the show. The point of the show is the going trends and history in the U.S. around what you put in your body. Right. And whether it's a crime or not. Because it's not a crime for you to put alcohol in your body. In some places, it's a crime for you to put marijuana in your body. And everywhere in the U.S., it's a crime for you to put LSD in your body.
Yeah.
For you to put it in your body, it's a crime.
Right.
I don't think that's the original definition of crime.
What's the original definition of crime?
I don't know, but when I looked it up in Google, Google said a crime is anything that goes against the law.
A crime is, well, that's how they use it now, yes.
Yeah, I thought crime was originally anything that is you infringing on someone else's rights or causing harm.
Well,
like that's what the government's supposed to do is stop people from infringing on other people's rights. But it seems like they've just redefined crime to be anything that goes against the law, which means whatever they make a law, if you break it, then you're a criminal. Like, you know, in some states there's a law that you can't put a pig in a bathtub. And in some states, there's a law that you can't do certain kinds of consensual sex with your partner in your house. And in some states, there's a law that frogs are not allowed to croak on Sundays. Like, that's a law. So if you have a frog that croaks on a Sunday, then now you're a criminal. If you have consensual sex with your partner in your house, that is the law in Kentucky, now you are a criminal.
Right.
Because crime just means breaking the law.
So I looked at the etymology, Latin, to judge.
Okay.
Which is different than what I thought. judgment or offense. And then if you want to move to Old French, wickedness, sin. Wickedness or sin.
Oh boy.
So I guess, from the understanding of crime that I was working from is that crime, the old dictionary definition that I knew was that crime was causing harm in some way, causing harm to the state, causing harm to an individual,
right,
causing harm to the environment.
It's not just you in your bubble existing in your life, it's you infringing on somebody else's life or rights. That's what crime is.
Right. So anyway,
our question for the show was in our social media was, should what you do with your body be a crime? And I think we have to divide the country into two extremely broad groups. And there is one very large group in the country that thinks that yes, some things you might want to do with your body are a crime because the Bible says it's sin. Like 70% of America or more think that certain things you do with your body should be a crime because the Bible says that it's sin, such as being married, such as gay marriage.
I don't know, 70% believe that.
Well, 70% still call themselves Christians.
But not 70% of Christians believe all that stuff.
Okay.
Not 100% of that 70% believe all that stuff.
That's true.
Crime is an indictment, an accusation, an offense, or a fault. So the idea, we bring that up because of the notion of the criminalization of something.
Oh, guess what? Fun fact.
What's that?
Criminalization is not a word.
That's not true.
Every time I typed it in every window and everywhere I type it in, it's like, do you mean decriminalization? I just think it's interesting that...
I found it.
What did they say?
Criminalization.
Yeah.
The action of turning an activity into a criminal offense by making it illegal.
So when I tried to type in all of my social media posts and in my Word documents and things,
autocorrect?
Autocorrect put that little jaggedy red line underneath it when I would type, we're going to talk about the history of the invention, use, and criminalization of drugs. They were like, autocorrect, this word isn't real. And that put me on a really interesting philosophical tear because it's almost as if certain things are just inherently crimes. They don't become crimes because people make them crimes.
The second definition is the action of turning someone into a criminal by making their activities illegal. So when marijuana was not a criminal act, and then they made it illegal to possess, sell, grow, partake in marijuana, suddenly all the people who were not criminals before are suddenly criminals. They're criminals.
Right.
And they begin to act like criminals because they have to be secretive about their criminality.
The thing that they do for themselves with their body that wasn't a crime before is now a crime, so now they have to act secretly in order to continue doing what they want to do with their body. James Bryan says, I don't think there are any laws in the U.S. against ingesting drugs. Just against possession and distribution.
Possession. Oh, is that true?
I don't know.
Oh, that's an interesting distinction.
Yeah. So you can...
If I take LSD,
yes,
but I don't have it on me and I have it in me,
yeah,
and I go to the hospital and say, the pink dragons are trying to get into my refrigerator.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, I need some help. They can't then help you and then prosecute
put you in jail
for being on. I can say I'm on LSD. I don't have any more.
I think if you, so say you take some acid and you go on a hike with friends.
Yeah.
And you go wandering off through the countryside and you happen to trespass on someone's property because you didn't know it was their property.
Okay.
And they catch you trespassing.
All right.
I think you would be prosecuted differently if you were just trespassing than if you were found to be trespassing while on an illegal substance.
Well, that would be another charge.
Much like if you were caught speeding, you were trespassed worse. You were prosecuted worse for being caught speeding sober on alcohol than if you were caught speeding sober.
Well, was your judgment impaired?
Right, but I don't know. Is it separate? is it separate citations? Like you get a citation for speeding and you get a citation for being drunk while driving, which is illegal.
And
like
if you were driving drunk and doing it badly, not just driving drunk, but doing bad things, then you could be charged with mayhem, which is another charge.
Right, more money.
Right.
So if you're at home,
and a federal offense.
It's true. If you're at home, it is not illegal for you to be drunk at home. It's not even illegal for you to have alcohol in your house at home, even though alcohol has zero beneficial traits for the human body. Alcohol does psychological things, fun emotional things, makes you feel more bold, but
doctors don't prescribe it.
Doctors don't prescribe it. Like we're going to talk later on about drug scheduling in the US and how the US, not every other country on the planet, because not every other country on the planet goes by the same rules that the US goes by, but how the US divides its drugs into worstest drugs and less worstest drugs. And in the US, a Schedule I drug is a drug with no acceptable medical use and a high potential for abuse. Guess what is not on that list? Alcohol.
Yeah.
No accepted medical use and a high potential for abuse. Alcohol is not on that list.
Yeah.
Emily Luttrell said, thank you for pointing out that not all Christians, hashtag not all Christians, which is something we try to do all the time because we both come from Christian environments and we know that not all Christians are like the ones we grew up with.
Right.
Not all Christians believe that just because it's a sin in the Bible, it should be a crime legally in the country for everyone. Some Christians have different spectrums. Some believe that gay marriage should be legal, but drug use should not, for example. And she also wants to know, hypothetically, should a seatbelt law be mandated by law? It's not, should seatbelt use be mandated by law? It's not only my body, it's also my vehicle. What do you think?
Well, that's kind of a side argument, but yes, I get it.
I think it's important to do reflective arguments to evaluate the point.
Right. I grew up in a family that hated the seatbelt law, that hated environmental laws, that hated the catalytic converter laws, that hated anything that had to do with public good because don't tell me what to do.
That's our inner libertarians coming out.
Some people are of the opinion that when you start putting these kind of safety mechanisms, like when they have windows that only go half down. I bought a car, and the manufacturer said you could only roll down your back window halfway, and that is
in case children fall out.
In case children fall out, maybe. And then my friend James Tripp used to have a joke. Maybe they shouldn't be messing around with natural selection that way.
Maybe we shouldn't be keeping everyone alive.
However, when you're a child of irresponsible parents, you might be thankful that there's a law that compels them to protect you.
Because children don't always have the self-knowledge to be aware that if they hang their heads out of a fully open window at 65 miles an hour, they might get run into by an oncoming vehicle.
I had a phobia about seatbelts because I was in a car wreck where if the seatbelt would have worked, I would have been crushed.
Right.
But I was thrown from the car and not crushed.
Right.
So...
Astrid says, if you're alone in the car, so your body, thrown around, won't hit anyone else, and promise not to crash through the windshield and hurt pedestrians, bicyclists, or the other driver you're crashing into, then no, you don't have to wear a seatbelt.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is do my behaviors cause harm to other people? To
other people, right. If I become a projectile and kill a bicyclist, maybe I should have worn my seatbelt.
We're prosecuting you.
Right.
Oh gosh, we're going to prosecute that crap. What was I thinking about with the seatbelt thing and the...
Oh, well, we want to keep it back on the drugs. I think we want to keep going back. We want to be on drugs for the rest of the show.
We're going to be on drugs.
We're going to keep
That's
the topic
the clip
going.
that people are going to cut out. They're going to cut out the clip of you wearing a MAGA hat, and they're going to cut out the clip of me saying we're on drugs.
Susan...
Welcome to the show, Susan.
So I think Dark hit the main point. What are the limits of individual rights when they threaten the general social welfare? Yes, that's a hot topic of how we do things.
So to go back to what Emily was saying. Not all Christians. And
right,
so my
not 70%. When you start throwing out numbers of 70%, and then you attach a generalization.
And I know that's not good science.
Right.
That's not responsible. That's not responsible. I want to be responsible. Hashtag not all Christians.
Thanks for calling us out.
Yes, this is important because we want to have a good show that's solid and valuable to people and not just be blathering things all over the internet.
I do want to blather things all over the internet.
And then have people be like, wait.
But I'm willing to admit where I've blathered incorrectly.
So, my personal morale... Emily says, stay on drugs, Ainsley. Stay on target. My personal morality is... figure out how to be the person you were supposed to be and do no harm.
Yeah. We talked about it on last week's show.
I think it's important to talk about because a lot of people protest you can't have morality without religion. A lot of people think humans would not choose morality reliably or voluntarily without religion, without somebody else telling them to. So, but if we set that principle aside, the principle of original sin, that everyone's born broken, if we set that aside for a second as specific to some Christians, and we just look at the idea of do no harm, then if we're just looking at the morality that what I do with my body is my freedom of choice. If what I do with my body causes harm to someone else, that is beyond the scope of my freedom of choice. Like we said last week, your freedom to swing your fist ends right before my face.
Right, and this is a great topic for high school debates forever.
Forever. Yes. Freedom of choice, do no harm.
Right.
So in the case of Emily saying some Christians have different spectrums, that they believe gay marriage should be legal, but drug use, quote unquote, should not.
Oh.
I don't think that is a proper use of the law. I don't think that the law should police you drinking alcohol or you smoking nicotine or you taking LSD. I do think the law should police your behavior that causes harm to other people when you use those substances.
Well, speaking of that,
okay.
I'd like to read the point. One of the things that we're focusing on is the drug policy of this country, how it came about. We can go back to the Wayback Machine.
Invention of drugs, history of the use of drugs, and the criminalization over time of drugs. Because they haven't always been illegal.
Right. So how did that happen? Why did that happen? And how does our drug policy today affect, is it working? Mm-hmm. Right. That's a good question. It's a war.
Right.
We've declared it a war. Is it working?
The war on drugs.
We need to have a discussion on whether the war on drugs is the appropriate approach to substance use and abuse.
And I'm going to talk about countries that have decriminalized what you do with your body and how that has affected those countries.
So I really want to make sure we get to this quote. We do, like, one of the things that to me is like the keystone of the argument for why we need to examine our drug policy is that architects of the drug policy years later came out and told why they had the policy. And it wasn't for public safety. It wasn't for your sake. It was for racist, cynical, political, partisan, financial means.
Yeah.
And it was a ruse. It was a lie.
That's been admitted
it's a lie.
Historically, documentedly by the people that started the drug war. We didn't do it to keep citizens safe.
No, that was never the premise.
Like, it's been super admitted.
But I'd like to start with like my story. Like, I grew up right-wing conservative Republican, yay Reagan, just say no, war on drugs, kid.
Go America.
Go America.
Go middle-class white men.
America, my country, right or wrong.
Right.
So growing up that way, I didn't touch anything in high school when people started doing it. I had friends that did it. I hung out with friends that did it. I pretended like I did it because they would get stoned. I would pretend to get stoned. I was one of those guys that would do the fake toking.
Why? Because Jesus might get you? Or...
Because I might become a heroin addict.
Wow. So you really believed it?
They came to our school. The drug enforcement and the law enforcement people came to our schools at various grades. In 4th grade, they came to the school with a video showing that if you smoke pot, you immediately end up at a party where somebody drops acid in your drink, you think you're a dragon, and you kill yourself jumping off a building. This is the natural progression of drugs.
If you smoke pot, you will end up dosed on acid and throw yourself out a window.
That's what happens when you smoke pot.
Or kill someone.
It's all of the same.
Yeah.
It's all the same thing.
That's how a lot of Christians think about being gay.
Right.
If you are gay, then you would probably molest children.
So in 6th grade, they showed up with a cop with a little pill that they burned that gave the smell of a marijuana joint. It was pressed pot. They came and they burnt pot in the classroom. So all the kids knew what pot smelled like.
So that they could...
And if you smell it in your...
Run away!
No, if you smell it in your house, make sure you call the cops. So they were teaching kids to rat out their parents.
Oh my gosh.
So they came to teach the kids how to rat out their pot-smoking parents.
Because it's bad and scary and dangerous, and you should be protected if your parents are being so abusive as to smoke pot around you.
Right, and so
marijuana,
I was not told anything about marijuana except it was called dope, and it made you dumb. And I'm like, I don't want to be dumb. So...
I'm the fortune-favored son of the father. And
so not wanting to be dumb, I didn't smoke pot.
Right.
And my little sister was like smoking pot in high school, and then I heard she was doing LSD, and like I was totally pearl clutching at 16 years old. Oh, she's lost forever.
So she was like 14, and you smelled that she was smoking pot, and you were like, oh no.
I knew she was...
Did you struggle with feeling like you needed to tell your parents for her?
No. The parents were the prison guards. The prisoners, you dispute your stuff amongst yourself.
I see.
So I was like really disheartened. So then I moved. I get out of high school, and I go to college, and I began to re-educate myself on everything because I thought the religion was.
How did you first find out
that?
What made you be like, wait a second, I was lied to about these substances being bad?
Before I ever smoked marijuana, I was involved in hours-long spades games with anarchists. So we would play cards
and talk philosophy.
And so the anarchists then
sweetly ask you why you were a Republican.
They would ask me why I was a Republican, why I was a Christian.
So why do you believe that?
Why do you believe that? Why do you think that? And so then they would ask me, about drugs, and I would say pot. Maybe between jumping off the building on heroin, you might steal some hubcaps. But that was the general arc. And then they started questioning, and then I started questioning because I realized that it's like that feeling of being a mouse among cats, where suddenly you realize they know something you don't know, and everybody knows it, and you don't know it. And so I went to the library, and I started doing research on drug policy at like 18.
Wow.
So I started doing research
on... Your school library? College library?
Yeah, OSU, Oklahoma State. So I go and I start looking into the history of drug policy, and I find these debates in the late 60s before criminalization had fully occurred. So they're having, hey, should we do this or not do this? And the pro and con arguments were clear as day that the drug policy was a racist, political... virtue signal. So that when we make this drug illegal, what we're actually doing is criminalizing anti-war people, criminalizing hippies, criminalizing jazz musicians, criminalizing all the people that are not great straight tied Americans.
Well, Nixon was very invested in the war, obviously, and had to make the good upstanding Americans non-sympathetic with someone who might try to talk them out of supporting the war.
Right. So that was the debate. When I read the debate, 20 years later, I read the debate and I'm like, well, this is obviously propaganda. I've been fed propaganda. And then it made me curious about what else I had been lied about. So marijuana actually was the gateway drug for me, because once I realized that I'd been lied to about that drug, I wanted to know what else I had been lied to about. U.S. foreign policy, all the other drugs,
right,
et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it was a gateway drug in terms of like, when I found out that was a lie, I wanted to know what else was a lie. And that was, I never have thought I was a dragon and have neglected to jump off a building.
Right.
But it was a gateway drug in the sense that reality was different once I started. And that
was a gateway.
And I hadn't smoked it.
Yeah.
I just learned that I'd been lied to about it, and that was the gateway.
That people in authority lied to you.
I could no longer trust a number of people who had bald face lied to my face, had lied to me. And now I can't look at you the same.
Mm-hmm.
I can't look at my parents the same. I can't. Now my parents, I feel like they were victims of propaganda. They probably never touched the stuff in their life. They heard it was bad. They enforced that it was bad.
Mm-hmm.
But the people who told them that knew it was a lie.
Right.
So it makes me see things differently. So that was my entryway into maybe doubting the status quo, doubting the consensus view of things.
Emily Luttrell.
Yes.
I'm very interested in this topic. I don't have a perfect answer for myself. As a foster mom, I'm very close to it. The biological parents of kids who come into my home have neglected and or abused their children, which is how the children entered foster care most of the time. You know, you get taken into foster care because you were abused.
Right.
Most of the time in the best system. Clearly, the poor choices that can result from drug use should be illegal.
The poor choices should be illegal?
Yeah, so if you are hooked on heroin because your life is horrible and you neglect your child and they burn themselves on the stove, that's a problem.
That's a problem.
Right. However, I see the impact that the stigma has on my kids. They're very aware that people view their parents negatively and that everyone automatically assumes their parents are bad people because they're addicted to drugs.
There's a study that is worth, I don't know if we can find it, but it's a study on addiction. The national societal narrative of addiction is that you're just a healthy person until you try an addictive substance.
And then it hooks you.
And then you become addicted, and then your life changes.
That's the story, is that the drug makes you addicted.
And then because of the addictive substance, you become a slave to it. Mm-hmm. That's the traditional story of addiction. That study was done on lab rats. They had laboratory rats that were set in solitary cages so they could monitor them one by one and have very even stats on what was happening. They gave them the option, let's say for heroin, that was one thing. So they gave them a water bottle and a heroin bottle. And once they started doing the heroin, they did a ton of heroin, they became addicted, so therefore heroin is addictive. Years later, somebody redid that study. And they didn't put the rats in separate cages.
They weren't in solitary confinement.
They created a happy environment for the rats.
A communal
environment. So
there was activities.
There was hierarchy, there was activities, there were generations, there was sex happening, there was socialization happening, there were fights happening. And they put a water bottle and a heroin bottle and nobody touched the heroin.
Addiction is a symptom.
So to blame the condition on the drugs is a story that we've been telling ourselves for a long time, but it has to do with the model of the study. And when you study differently, you get different results. And so if we are isolated and unhappy and unsocialized and unfulfilled
and feel like we're not being the person we're supposed to be,
heroin can look like a really good option. If you're having a good time and excited
and
connected and have fulfilling relationships, there's no need to escape.
Right.
That's heroin. And so when people say drugs, heroin is a very different experience than methamphetamines. Methamphetamines is a completely different world than LSD. DMT is a whole other level of experience and science and taboo. There's a lot of different drugs that do different things in the brain.
GHB, cannabis, Adderall.
So when you say drugs, you're like saying nature.
Right.
Like that includes a lot of stuff.
A drug, by definition, is a medicine or a substance that causes physiological changes in the body. That's everything. That's broccoli.
Yeah.
Sugar.
Water or lack of water.
Yeah.
So talking about, like, defining our terms is good, but we weren't raised in an environment where the goal was not to educate people on drugs. The goal was to criminalize an aspect of your society. That's really what happened.
I mean, like, and that's not us saying that's pretty much what happened, kids. It's like, no, that's really what happened.
That's what happened.
As in, we know the names of the people who made the statement saying, we criminalize drugs federally to stigmatize anti-war protesters and minorities.
So I'll read the piece This is a CNN piece in the politics section from 2016. Tom Lo Bianco was the guy who wrote it. Washington. One of Richard Nixon's top advisors and key figures in the Watergate scandal said that the war on drugs was created as a political tool to fight blacks and hippies, according to a 22-year-old interview recently published in Harper's Magazine. Quote,
22 years ago was 1996.
Yes. The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. Former Nixon domestic policy chief John Ehrlichman told Harper's writer Dan Baum for the April cover story published Tuesday. Quote, you understand, this is Ehrlichman speaking, you understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black people, but by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. Ehrlichman said, we could arrest their leaders, raid their homes, break up their meetings, and vilify them night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did. So that is how our modern drug policy was set into. It was a racist, classist, political tool to criminalize your neighbors. And people who didn't do marijuana or do heroin or had nothing to do with the anti-war movement thought, ooh, look at those scary people.
Uh-oh, I guess those people are bad because the government that I trust told me they're bad.
Right. So your neighbors began to turn on their neighbors because in a Milgram-like experiment, the government said you should do it. And they said, well, the government said we should do it.
Right.
So, and that turned into a policy where there's no big gap between pot smoking with black people and white people. The same percentage of black people smoke pot as white people, but three
4 times.
Three is it
Four
three out of four?
4
Four times
more.
as many African Americans are in jail or prison for that.
For marijuana-related crimes.
For some reason, we do it the same, but way disproportionately, black people go to jail.
Right.
So when you have somebody running for president who says, I'm not for legalizing marijuana because it's a gateway drug, they're a liar. Because the gateway drug was, that's a trope that came from Reagan's age it was never based on science. And it's been debunked over and over and over and over. And so when you have a presidential candidate in a new century using the old worn out tropes of a previous century,
right, and
you say that's somebody I want to support, it's problematic to me.
Yeah.
That's a political sideways. We should go back.
That's racism. Where you can't say you're being racist by not wanting to support marijuana legalization, but that person is being racist.
That is a racist policy perpetuated by people who know that it was a racist policy. You can't not know that that was a racist policy. That's how you shore up your base. It's code words. I'm not for legalizing marijuana. Means I'm down with jailing black people and the radicals. Mm-hmm. That's what
you might want to jail a black person because you struggle with your own racism, but they haven't done anything wrong. But except he's got a joint.
He's got a joint.
So now you can put him in prison.
Yes.
Right. So 710 and 805 grew up in a house where substance use was the norm.
Okay.
And there's a difference between use and abuse.
Very
the training and the brainwashing that we've been given over the last 70, 80 years has synonymized use with abuse.
Yeah.
But those are not the same things. He says, I was raised in an environment where substance use was the norm. And I asked, did you get the feeling or judgment that substance use was good or bad? But growing up in it. Sometimes when you grow up in something, you don't think it's bad because you're around it all the time, or you totally think it's bad because you're around it all the time.
Right.
It's different.
It depends on use or abuse by the people around you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he said, where is it? Snap. It was only perceived as quote-unquote bad from outside the family unit. And it was kind of like an us versus them thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So he grew up in a house where substance use was normal, and it was I wonder if it was almost kind of like our freedom of choice, our rights sort of conversation. Like my freedom of choice, my body, my choice against the outside neighbors, you know? He also said, should poor choices from schizophrenia or bipolar disorder be illegal? If addiction is genetic, then it's the same thing. I don't know if I don't think addiction is genetic. I think, and I know that I don't have a medical degree.
Yeah.
And lots of people with medical degrees have talked about addiction being genetic. That it's something that you can catch from your mom who was hooked on crack.
If you're in
you can catch the disease of addiction.
Right.
But I don't think addiction is genetic any more than being sad is genetic.
Well, I think it can become genetic in that your RNA, like if you are having a hard time, let's say you're kicked out of your clan because you broke the taboo, and now you're out in the world and you've had a terrible time because you haven't been able to cope in the world, and you become a crack. Let's say you become a crack addict, right? That goes on for years, and you have a child sometime in that period. That child, the top of their DNA is your RNA. So they're integrating your bad life, your negative experience into their DNA.
Right. My daddy was a rageaholic.
So and they're also being born into that environment. So
where they
it's
see
not
those
just
habits.
something that happened and didn't happen.
Right.
It's now you're having that RNA reinforced with their DNA is now being reinforced by their RNA, which is a continuation of that cycle. So I think cycles of abuse, cycles of poverty, yes, they can perpetuate a cycles of...
Is poverty genetic?
They can perpetuate cycles of addiction. These are all things like when you get into the cycle, those are not easy holes to climb out of. So, not a doctor, but I don't think addiction is a separate thing over here.
There are plenty of studies that show that addictive personality syndrome is passed down through the generations, perhaps epigenetics. I definitely know people who go towards escapism as a defense mechanism. Some personalities, when they have to feel like when they're feeling badly, some personalities lash out, and some personalities retreat. And I think escapism is a kind of retreat, fight or flight. We know this also scientifically.
Right.
When a being feels threatened, they will fight or flight, or freeze or fawn. But for this example, we'll say fight or flight.
Yeah.
So if somebody feels threatened, say the dad gets fired at work and he goes home and he's feeling threatened as a dad and as a provider and as a man in society, and he lashes out at his children. That's fight. He can't lash out at his boss because he just got fired and got kicked out of the building.
Right.
But that's his reaction. His natural reaction is usually to fight. Somebody else gets fired, and they go home and get a bottle from under the counter and go into their bedroom and ignore their children all evening.
Right.
That's a flight response. They can't run away from being fired from their job, but they are going to run away all the same.
Right.
And I think escapism, some people have tendencies towards fight, and some people have tendencies towards flight, for sure. For sure. I still maintain that a person genetically inclined to addiction, living in a happy, healthy environment, is not going to just go get addicted to things.
That makes sense to me.
So a person in a happy, healthy environment who's genetically inclined to addiction or escapism or flight, living in a happy, healthy environment, experiences some drug at a party or a friend's house, I don't think they're going to be inclined to go down a path towards addiction just because they're genetically inclined towards it, if there is not an impetus to become addicted. I think addiction is a response. Addiction is a response to something bad in your environment. I think if you have a happy life, you will not respond with addiction.
That is what studies are coming to prove when you change the model of the study. When you actually study creatures that are having a healthy life during the study and not being prisoners in a cell during the study. I want to go back a little bit.
So many great comments.
Do the comments.
So many great comments. I'm so glad people are participating. We do have a lot of and thankfully the topics people are bringing up are topics that we want to talk about.
Right.
Like I do want to address the foster child thing later on.
Yeah.
Because I want to talk about people who just want to be mad at coronavirus because it's hurting their loved ones, and people who just want to be mad at drugs because it's hurt their loved ones.
Right.
And that's a conversation we need to have.
Yes.
You know.
Sure.
Like. Tammy Strong, addiction is a symptom. My friend James is like, yes, addiction is a symptom. You know, like he's done a lot of work to change his life into a happier, healthier life, and has recovered from things he struggled with in the past. Emily says, I have an addictive personality, but almost zero trauma as a child. So she says her anecdotal evidence also supports the theory that even a person with a predisposition genetically to be addicted to things won't do it if there's no reason. If you're happy, you're not just going to go get addicted to things if you're happy. On the flip side, Emily says, I may have inherited genetically my grandmother's food insecurity because I've always had enough to eat, but I panic whenever I feel like I'm running out of pantry items or when someone eats some of my french fries.
That can be totally passed down
I
genetically.
have food insecurity too for no reason.
Yeah.
Seemingly no reason. 710 and 805 says, there are plenty of studies that show that addictive personality syndrome is passed down through generations, perhaps epigenetics, but their child might be more prone, even in a happy, healthy environment, from what he's read, regardless of home environmental conditions.
Okay.
Yeah. I think our society's perception of what a happy, healthy environment is really screwed up.
Yeah.
I think people should be happy in environments that are not actually healthy. I think people think if your mom and dad are still married and you always have food and you always have clothing, you have no reason to be an addict, and that is a shallow view of what makes a healthy environment.
James Bryan says that, responding to Audrey, he says abuse is a choice based on poor decision making due to underlying conditions, and that's a standard answer.
Yeah.
And I think it's not a black and white answer.
Not black and white. But Astrid was like, Astrid kind of seems to have that mindset that you were
I have an addictive personality. I have an addiction for years.
Yeah.
And I know what I'm doing the whole time. I know that I am not in balance, and what I'm doing is unhealthy, but I'm doing it over and over and over. So, yes, it is a choice. Mm-hmm. In the same way that it's a choice that you have to vote blue no matter who.
Right.
It's a choice, but your choices are limited because your conditions are so bad.
Right.
That's a part of it. And I'm not legitimizing like, oh, well, if conditions are bad, you should become a heroin addict. It's not that easy. I think when you are having, like Astrid said, no one is totally happy, are they? There will always be struggles in life. I think there's a difference between healthy struggles in life where you might have a family unit that is supporting you, or a community that is supporting you in your growth, and they catch you when you fall, and other people who have no net.
When you're feeling badly, you can't go get help.
There's no one to go to. You don't have the money, you don't have the friends, you don't have the network.
You don't have the time.
There's a lot of people who don't have the time. They're just working their asses off. They don't have the time, and they don't have the network, and they don't have the support, so they don't deal with the problems. So yes, struggles are healthy. You struggle as a being to grow. That's a struggle.
I think I struggle more now than I did in my first 27 years of being a good Christian wife and daughter. I think I struggle more now. I'm constantly duking it out psycho-emotionally with myself and the universe in general. I was way more depressed and sick when I was in a nice tidy box of just follow these rules and you'll go to heaven.
Right.
I was depressed and sick, and I used escapism all the time. I was constantly, like, I don't talk about this very often, but for the full 5 years of my marriage, because it was so depressing and such a letdown from what I had been promised, I read porn. I read book porn, like, every night for hours. And I knew that it was escapism. I knew that because I couldn't fix my marriage, I was escaping to a magical world where sexual relationships worked.
Right.
I don't need to do that now. Right. You know? I still have the desire for escapism sometimes.
But that environment engenders some other behavior to fill the hole that's not being filled, right?
Escapism and addiction come up as reactions to something you cannot fix.
Right.
I have a situation I cannot fix. I have to get away. Fighting doesn't work. I will flight. Escapism and addiction.
Right. Astrid is laughing at me for calling her Audrey. Every week.
Every week now. I guess you're just our honorary Audrey. We'll send you a pin to Sweden. 710 and 805 says, so if we have a tendency to deal with struggles in what is generally viewed as a self-destructive way, does that give society the right to make our struggles illegal?
Well,
no.
Yeah, I want to go back a little bit.
Okay.
Because we started with we're talking about the 1970s Drug Act, the criminalization where we criminalized marijuana and started scheduling all these drugs. That could not have happened without a backstory. And so there's a book that anybody who's interested on our current drug policy, and especially the policy around marijuana and hemp, which are different things, but are not treated as different things. There was a book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes. It was published in 1985 by a guy named Jack Herrera. There's a couple of pot strains named after him. I think he also, it's a sativa, a full sativa, a Jack Herrera strain. He wrote the book, which was going back and doing, researching the history of hemp in particular and marijuana. So there's Indian hemp, which translates to hashish. It's a long, hundreds and hundreds of years cultural thing to smoke hashish. That's Indian hemp. And then there's European hemp, which is good fiber for making ropes, textiles, clothing, paper, etc., etc.
Like they're making car bodies out of it. Like you can make a plastic stronger than whatever that stuff is they put the military
More elastic.
in.
More elastic.
It's just
Teflon. No.
Teflon.
No. The woven stuff.
What do they put the military in?
Yeah. Camouflage?
No. Somebody tell Kevlar.
Kevlar, yes.
Thank you. It was like I have all the shapes of the word in my mouth.
Yeah, that. So that book is a foundational book in terms of understanding the other side of the war on marijuana. There's where is the Smoke and Mirrors? There was I lost the book, but there are a number of organizations that have put up $100,000 to anybody who can disprove the assertions made in the book.
Yeah, go ahead, prove us wrong.
So there's a $100 grant out there for anybody to prove their historical claims and their qualitative and quantitative claims. Basically, they're saying we could end all petrochemical usage, all the oil, plastics, replace it in a more sustainable manner with hemp.
Yeah.
Oils, papers, textiles, clothing, foodstuffs, vitamins, etc., etc. You can go down the list. You can make car bodies out of hemp. And housing materials out of hemp. And
not only can we make everything out of hemp, but it fixes drained soil.
Yeah, it repairs worn out soil.
Fixes the ozone layer.
It's highly renewable. You can grow so much more hemp in a field than you can grow trees.
And it's not depleting the soil.
Et cetera, et cetera. So this book goes on to talk about the history, and in that book, they started criminalizing or started demonizing marijuana in the 30s as a drug policy because back then it wasn't the anti-war and the hippies, it was the Mexicans. Because in the 1930s we were really trying to steal the Southwest from, we'd already drawn the lines, but now we were fully removing the inhabitants of the Southwest. And so
the great state of California!
So we had to criminalize the indigenous. We had to criminalize those folks, and those folks like to smoke a little of that Indian hemp. And so if you smoke hemp, you will go wild and start raping people, and Mexicans like to smoke hemp. That's the propaganda machine in the 30s.
So it was like
to demonize a minority class.
Like, y'all, nobody wants to be called brainwashed. I know that I have been brainwashed. And in knowing that I have been brainwashed, I can begin to take back control over my own thoughts.
Not knowing.
No, Billie Jean. If you deny that you were brainwashed, then you cannot begin to figure out which thoughts you chose and which thoughts someone else gave to you. It's worse than just we need to make Mexicans bad guys so we can take their land. It's we need to make moral, empathetic citizens think that Mexicans don't deserve to keep their land.
Yeah.
It's that we need to make moral, empathetic U.S. citizens think that it's okay for us to take Mexicans' land because they're marijuana-smoking rapists. It's brainwashing. Your grandparents were brainwashed. Your parents were brainwashed. They raised you from a perspective of being brainwashed.
So this story gets even more beautiful. This is one of the most beautiful American stories. William Randolph Hearst, he was like the Rupert Murdoch of his day. He owned a monopoly on a number of news outlets, newspapers. He also was an industrialist, so he had lots of his fingers in a lot of pies. Steel.
He was making money on both ends.
Timber. So he was making money off the timber, making money off of making the timber into paper, and then making money off of the printing on the paper. So he was cashing in from one end to the other. Smart capitalist, right? So he took the racist campaign of anti-Mexican marijuana, turned it into a campaign where people were confused in their minds the difference between hemp for textiles and marijuana for neurochemical augmentation. He confused those and used the words interchangeably in the newspapers.
Brainwashing the civilians.
So that when it came time to make hemp illegal, everybody said, yes, we should make hemp illegal. What he was doing in that move was taking out his timber industry competitors. Mm-hmm. He was his hemp competitors. Because if you don't have hemp anymore, suddenly you need more wood.
So people will buy more paper made from trees because there isn't paper made from hemp. This is the same guy that
hemp,
also tried
clothing, etc.
If you've ever seen the Newsies.
Also the cotton industry.
This is the same guy that tried to screw the Newsies out of the price that they had to pay for papers.
Right.
There wasn't anything sensational going on. People weren't buying as many papers. And so in order to stop losing money, William Randolph Hearst tried to charge the Newsies, who distributed the papers, more money per paper.
Right.
So they would go in the morning, buy a stack of 10 or 20 papers, and then sell them for an upcharge. That was how they distributed the newspapers in New York City. And so William Randolph Hearst's advisors were like, well, just charge the Newsies a little bit more for their papers. Because the Newsies weren't buying as many papers because there wasn't anything interesting being written about in the newspapers because nothing was necessarily going on. And so in order to stop, this guy was rude.
He was rude.
He was just motivated by money.
So the early stages of the 1970s drug started back in the 30s and earlier with William Randolph Hearst taking another racist drug policy, folding it into a way to do real damage on the hemp industry, which was a whole industry that had nothing to do with getting high. You're not going to get high off of hemp.
Right. But because he made he brainwashed the citizens to think that hemp and marijuana were the same thing, then he could be like, ooh, bad marijuana smokers. We have to illegalize marijuana, and then it illegalized everything all at once.
He killed the competitive industry through propaganda. And we've been living with that propaganda. People go to jail. People get crushed all the time. That's what led to this book that came out, I think it was 1996. So when I read that article, 1997, Dan Baum, he's the guy that got that article from, that confession from Ehrlichman. Right? That
Nixon's aide who was like...
Designed the drug policy.
We totally knew we were criminalizing people that Nixon didn't like.
Right. So this guy Dan Baum, B-A-U-M, wrote a book that was published in 1997 called Smoke and Mirrors, The War on Drugs and the Politics of Failure. And I'm going to read a description from the book, the description of the book. For sheer government absurdity, the war on drugs is hard to beat. After 3 decades of increasingly punitive policies, illicit drugs are more easily available, drug potencies are greater, drug killings are more common, and drug barons are richer than ever. The war on drugs cost Washington more than the Commerce, Interior, and State Departments combined, and it's the one budget item whose growth is never questioned.
Gotta keep fighting the drugs for the children.
Right, a strangled court system, exploding prisons, and wasted lives pushed the cost beyond measure. What began as a flourish of campaign rhetoric in 1968 has grown into a monster. And while nobody claims that the war on drugs is a success, nobody suggests an alternative. Because to do so, as Surgeon General Jocelyn Elders learned, is political suicide. Dan Baum interviewed more than 175 people, from John Ehrlichman to Janet Reno, to tell the story of how the drug war fever has been escalated, who has benefited along the way, and how the mounting price in dollars, lives, and liberties has been willfully ignored.
Liberties.
Smoke and Mirrors takes you right into the offices where each new stage was planned and executed, then takes you to the streets where policies have produced bloody warfare. This is a tale of the nation run amok in a way the American people are not yet ready to confront. This was written in 1997. So in 2020, you have a presidential candidate saying marijuana is a gateway drug and should stay illegal. That's sad for me to know that people will hear that and still say that is somebody that I can support. Because it's racist to the core. And he knows it's racist. You don't say that because you've read the studies of how it's a gateway drug.
Especially not after 40 years in politics.
You say that to shore up your prison industry. You say that to make sure that the people in the prison industry know that you have their back. You say that to know that the pharmaceutical industry, he's got your back. You say that to the southern racists because they know who goes to jail for these offenses. That's what he's saying clearly to them, but not to people on the left who don't seem to understand the racist nature of this policy.
Did you guys know that the prison industrial complex in this country is a for-profit industry?
Some people in the rest of the world may not know that. Hopefully people here know that.
No, people in the U.S. don't know that.
Wait, that's the other thing. One, Astrid is going to appreciate this. I found a study, and it goes anywhere from 24% to 18%, but still, even if it's 18%, of Americans, when asked, does the sun revolve around the earth, or does the earth revolve around the sun, 18 to 24% of Americans said it was their opinion that the sun revolved around the earth, that the earth is the center of the known universe, apparently. That's a lot of people.
That's a lot of people that just misheard it in school, never had to fact check it, and don't care. And, it's not necessarily incredibly important, but that also means that's a person that's not checking a lot of other stuff.
So drug policy is not going to be clearly scrutinized by those folks. You have more comments?
Oh, we have so many more comments.
Say stuff.
Norway.
Yes.
I shared a article a little further up from Bored Panda about an ad campaign teaching people the effects of drugs to prevent overdose and death. A harm reduction ad campaign. 710 and 805 was saying maybe we should focus more on rehabilitation and harm reduction than in governmentally mandated spankings for people who struggle with abuse.
Right. We should. Benny M. West has commented, and he said that we're stretching, that he doesn't want any drugs made legal. He's not listening to what we're saying, apparently, but he is saying drugs are bad. Thanks for contributing, Benny.
Benny says we're really concerned that society has chosen to make certain drugs illegal. I sure don't want meth, coke, heroin, fentanyl, etc. Marijuana opinions aren't racist. What a stretch.
Well, we're saying it's not a stretch.
I
We're
don't
saying
think-
that that's actual history and policy.
Yeah, maybe you're not racist, Benny. Maybe, I mean, like, the average citizen having feelings about marijuana is probably not being racist about marijuana, but the
feelings that you have were engineered by a racist
you
agenda.
were brainwashed to think marijuana is bad
Sorry.
by the government criminalizing marijuana because they wanted to criminalize minorities and anti-war protesters. It's fact.
If you think that marijuana policy is not racist in design and practice, then you don't know
Some facts that you could
the
know.
facts about that policy.
Yeah, which
If
you could know.
Yeah, if you knew the facts about the policy, you would see that it is racist in nature and in implementation.
Ongoingly today.
To this point.
People are making money from the sale of marijuana while other people are in prison, and the prison is making money off of them being in prison for having had marijuana.
And they fund politicians that say marijuana should not be made legal.
The prisons do.
Couldn't be corruption. It's just coincidence.
Yeah.
I'm sure.
Shayna says, I'm bummed I didn't realize this was happening sooner.
Oh, well.
I'm sorry, I tried to send out some invites to people that I figured would be really interested in the topic. But we still have a whole nother hour. I got you, baby.
I got it.
Oh, he's going all the way under there. So this article that I shared, we've got a whole other hour. So if you've got some thoughts, please share because I know you're deep in the work, Shayna. Boardpanda.com, an article about harm reduction posters in Norway. They put up these posters with faces of people, because a lot of times, like other folks in our feed were saying, we think of a drug user, again, with the abuser and user being mixed together as if they're the same thing. They're
like
not the
hemp
same.
and marijuana.
Like if you take Adderall or aspirin, you're a drug user. You are a drug user if you take aspirin.
It's true.
You're a drug user if you drink coffee. You're a drug user if you drink alcohol. Those things are substances that cause physiological changes in the body. That's what a drug is.
It's just a matter of whether they're scheduled or they're not scheduled.
And in the U.S., scheduled means on a specific list from 1 to 5 of really super dangerous, bad, and not medically useful to somewhat medically useful and not as dangerous. That's the list, the schedule in the U.S. So they put up these posters of normal-looking people because not every person who uses drugs has a bunch of scabs on their face and hair falling out.
True.
Like the stereotype gets pushed. Just like not every Christian looks like the Christians in TV shows where they're like all wearing plain white dresses and folding their hands and walking weirdly through the hallways.
Right.
Like not all Christians look like that. So one of these signs says, Thomas did not die when he tried GHB. He avoided alcohol all night and dosed correctly.
So that's information.
Yeah, another sign says, it's a picture of a cute girl in a sweater. Sarah did not die when she tried MDMA. She just took half a dose and waited to feel the effects. John did not die when he overdosed on heroin. He was not alone, and his friends had naloxone.
Which is something to help you if you overdose?
Emma did not die when she overdosed on alcohol. Her friends recognized the symptoms and called 911. You know why people lie? People don't lie because they are liars. People lie because telling the truth would be punished. Because they think telling the truth would be worse than keeping a secret.
Right.
People don't call 911 when their friends are in danger because they're afraid of getting spanked by the government. And so they can't call 911 to get their friends help. The thing that I really like about these posters is that every single one of them starts with, Emma did not die.
Right.
John did not die, because that's what we should care about.
So what happened after
I
they
am
put
so
those...
pissed off right now.
What happened when they put those posters up?
I don't know, it's a really long article. Let's see. Knowledge can save lives. Accurate and useful information about drugs without moralizing drug use. By informing people about the effect, risk, and precautions when using various drugs, we are reducing harm. 2 years ago, Norway became the first Scandinavian country to decriminalize drugs in a historic vote. The government in this well-off northern country, Board Panda points out, are putting more focus on prevention, psychological help, investment in treatment programs and aftercare facilities, rather than in mindless punishments of people who are using drugs. The change will take some time, but that means a changed vision. Those who have a substance abuse problem should be treated as ill and not as criminals with classical sanctions such as fines and confinement.
Did you do was it Portugal that legalized all drugs too.
Oh, Portugal. Yeah, that's another great case. You can Google that. You can Google the decriminalization of drugs in Portugal. They did that actually a while ago.
A long time ago.
And you can see the effects that it's had on their criminal statistics and their health statistics and their death statistics.
The burden on the legal system, the burden on the police to enforce a non-harmful crime, right? So they made it a crime, but it's not committing any harm. So your legal system is constipated with things that really shouldn't be in the system.
Are not crimes.
Your police are constipated with something that shouldn't be bothering them, right? When they got rid of that and they started dealing with, rather than, we're a very punitive country because of our Judeo-Christian roots and through line, and so we love to spank. We love to punish for disobeying. But when you take a different approach as a different kind of parental unit and say maybe there should be some guidance and maybe we should do some education so that those people can make correct choices versus setting them up to fail by criminalizing people who were not committing crimes. This is the big difference in drug policy, where we are and where we should be going. So when our viewer here, Mr. West, says that he doesn't want meth, coke, heroin, fentanyl, etc. made legal, I say I do. I think heroin should be legal. I think methamphetamine should be legal. I think all the drugs.
I'm sorry, I was not
legal.
laughing at you.
No.
I just for viewers, I was not laughing at what you're saying. Please continue.
What are you laughing at?
Emily says, darn you, I'm trying to look up chicken breast recipes while listening. But because of the topic, I typed chicken breast symptoms.
What came up? Now I want to type that in.
Like, what, chicken butt? Well, like, chicken breast symptoms.
Chicken breast symptoms.
You may know that you have chicken breasts if these signs. Okay, so go back.
So yeah, really I think all the drugs should be legal because it's shown that when you decriminalize and demoralize the use of drugs,
as in don't make it a good or bad person issue.
Right. Use and abuse both go down.
Right.
Not just abuse, but use goes down.
Right.
The need to go break the law, the need to be illegal. Right.
Guess why you ate way more cookies when you were a kid? Because you thought you weren't supposed to.
So when it is no longer legal or illegal, the price goes down. When the price goes down, it no longer concentrates power in the hands of drug dealers. So they have lessened their role in your community because they don't have the fat money coming off of the black market product. So that has a cascading effect. So is heroin a good thing or a bad thing? It's not either.
It is
heroin
it's just a thing.
A substance
like heroin
that can be used or abused. Right.
An orange, heroin, coffee.
Same thing. Methamphetamine
sugar.
Methamphetamine was invented by the Japanese government, I understand, to help them rebuild after the atomic bomb.
Methamphetamine was invented by Japan?
I believe it was Japan.
Okay.
And they needed to rebuild their entire country because we annihilated 2 of their major cities.
Guess what else is an amphetamine?
What's that?
Adderall.
Yes. So
you might take Adderall when you need to get some stuff done.
So methamphetamine is considered highly scheduled, is illegal, can get a prescription from your doctor if you fill out a list.
Right.
If you know the list to fill out, you can go to your doctor, fill out the list, and get a legally sanctioned version of amphetamine.
Yes. Not the stuff. How do you do meth?
Crystal meth?
You snort it through a needle?
You can melt it and snort it. I used to snort it whenever I did meth. So you snort it. That's, or you smoke it like crack.
Ouch.
You vaporize it and you smoke it, which is weird. Do not recommend it. However,
did you get a lot done?
I have mixed reviews. When I was in my early 20s, before the anti-meth campaigns were out there, I did some experiments, but this is for another show.
Right.
I'm not going to say yay, nay, or any of that because that's not the point of the show. The point of the show is the policy and whether the policy makes sense. So what's happened since the drug policy is more power in the hands of the drug dealers, more drugs, more death, more prison time for Americans. That's what's happened. It hasn't reduced drug use. It hasn't reduced concentration of power of the drug dealers. It hasn't reduced the urge to do the drugs. So the drug war is a failure. We've known it's a failure, but if you say it's a failure, then you assassinate yourself politically. That's why Joe Biden is saying, I think marijuana is a gateway drug. It's ridiculous.
Right, like gay is a gateway action to pedophilia.
It's ridiculous.
Emily says, my evangelical Christian mother offered me cigarettes once, in all seriousness, because she knew that it would take away the coolness factor. I didn't accept, but I did try some wine when she offered it. Blech. Never developed a taste for it. Right. The uncool factor is real. Mm. If you could do the thing if you wanted to without stigma, you're not going to care as much.
They legalized marijuana in Colorado, and they say that you really shouldn't smoke marijuana until after 19 because of your developing brain, that it's better because it can affect memory and such.
Except in like extreme cases where they're using it to treat cancer, pain, and stuff like that. Right?
Yeah, there's a lot of information there. But when they made marijuana legal for medical use and it became more commonplace, kids stopped doing it. Youth rates, the generation and the age group that would be most negatively affected of doing marijuana, their use went down when it became more legal.
When it became something that you could do and not a cool thing that you're not supposed to do.
When it became less illegal.
Yeah.
It became less attractive. And usage went down.
Noah Nusser. Do you know Noah Nusser?
Yes, I know Noah.
He says Bayer was the first people/company to concentrate opium to heroin, I think. Private prison systems getting grants to stay full.
Right.
Two topics.
Yeah, so the prison industrial complex came on the heels of the drug policy. You make more people criminals, you need places to put them. And the prison industrial complex mushroomed in the 80s. Not only did the complex mushroom, but there's money going, that your taxpayer dollars goes to pay the private prisons to manage the inmates. And they do such fun shenanigans as moving prisoners around a lot. So you can be busted in Hawaii, but they don't have a prison for you there, so they're going to ship you to Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. And then
they make money off the shipment.
They make money off the shipment. So they need to ship you to California. So there's a lot of moving of cattle and being charged. You're paying, like you're supporting the drug policy. Taxpayers are supporting the drug policy, are supporting the movement of humans for money. Not because they did anything wrong. Mm-hmm. So they broke the law. And now they're in prison. Mm-hmm. Now they're in prison, serving their time, and being used to milk the system for your tax dollars by moving them around and charging you $200 or $500 or $1,700 to move you from one prison to another, and all the paperwork that costs.
Astrid says, research in Europe shows that even if parents invite their kids into drinking or smoking, it doesn't make a difference. It depends on their friends group.
Yeah.
Shayna responds, yeah, but when you shift from the consequences largely being around criminal punishment to focus on the biopsychosocial consequences, such as treatment or harm reduction, you get to address the consequences for the person if they are experiencing them, rather than going to incarceration, which doesn't actually address many of the consequences or reduce the likelihood of recidivism.
And if you...
What's recidivism?
Whether they'll go back out and do it again. So what happens is if you are not a criminal, but then you are forced to survive in a criminal justice system, which means being surrounded by criminals, that's where you learn to do criminal stuff better. That's your college.
Astrid has been protesting that she feels like we're leaving a very important part out of the conversation today.
Okay.
Which is a discussion around the consequences if we do legalize drugs.
What are the consequences?
If people can just do drugs whenever they want to, won't that be harmful for their loved ones?
That's the same Judeo-Christian argument that without the Bible, you're just going to run around raping.
Can you expand on that?
Without the Bible, without the Lord telling you what's wrong, you're a broken animal and you're going to murder, rape, and steal, right? So that's a false premise, in my opinion, because I don't read the Bible and I don't murder, rape, and steal. And I'm not afraid of a Bible God
Yeah.
That's not why I'm not raping and stealing and murdering.
My favorite quote on that is from the musician Penn of Penn and Teller.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't not rape because the God of the Bible told me not to rape. I don't rape because I don't want to rape people.
Right. So whenever you take the stigma, the cool factor, part of the cool factor of drugs is their black market appeal. Is the idea that like when you're a kid and you're trying to differentiate yourself from your parents, or you're trying to differentiate yourself from an old friends group that doesn't serve you anymore, or you're trying to be anti-government because you need to rebel or something, you're going to go to the thing that they say don't go to. If that's no longer a thing to go to, if you have to go through the paperwork to get ketamine treatment, or if you have to go through some, insurance policy to get your heroin, I don't know how all that stuff would work. But if you get to that point, that's not something, it's lost its cool factor at that point. The reason you do those things, and then when you can study those things, when you can actually have harm reduction stuff put out there, like if you do this drug and you haven't done this, you're going to have this experience. But if you do this drug and you do this, you'll have this experience. Helping people have better experiences in choosing what they're doing and how they're doing it, you have less harm. Mm-hmm. Now, the question is, drug use up or down? I don't give a damn if drug use is up or down. What I care about is drug abuse. When the drugs begin to have an impact on the community.
We have to keep clarifying that.
Do I want my bus driver to be on heroin? No, I do not. Yes. I don't want my bus driver to be on heroin.
And I think
that doesn't mean that nobody should ever do heroin.
That doesn't mean your bus driver cannot do heroin at home. You also don't want your bus driver to be drinking alcohol while he's driving.
Yes. Yes.
I don't want my bus driver impaired on marijuana while he's driving. The regulation and the criminal justice system needs to shift away from what you do with your body to how you treat other people. I don't think we have a problem, Astrid, between our worldviews. I think there's a very nice Venn diagram of our worldviews.
Yeah.
Because all of us want people to not harm other people. And that's where the law should be involved. If you are harming other people, that is where the law should be involved. What you are doing with yourself.
Well, it's interesting because Astrid commented again. She goes, but I have friends that had parents that were posh.
Quote unquote.
Addicts, pills, alcohol.
Posh addicts. Yes.
She could never.
Mommy takes muscle relaxers.
She could never trust her parents. She didn't know. Okay, well I'm not sure what she's saying there.
Well, let's just read the whole comment.
Okay, carry on.
Astrid says,
yes.
I have friends that had parents that were quote unquote posh addicts, pills and alcohol.
Acceptable levels of dabbling.
Lots of mommies do that, the muscle relaxer and wine routine.
Right.
She could never trust her parents. She didn't know which personality that was at home coming from school.
So
she says it was like having four parents. The parent that was sober and the parent that was on the chemical.
So if the parents are using drugs and they're open and conscious and healthy and responsible about using drugs, I think that's a different experience than when parents are abusing drugs.
Just like if you have a parent that has wine in the evening versus a parent who gets drunk on wine
and becomes a raging maniac.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's irresponsible.
But alcohol's legal.
Yeah. And so are muscle relaxers.
Should I not have a drink of whiskey because that guy, when he drinks whiskey, starts beating his wife?
I think it's a huge complex problem because how do we help children in the homes of people who may be abusing a substance and mistreating the child?
Well, that's why I think the stats are useful to say when you make it all legal and you remove the punitive aspect of it, use and abuse both go down. That's something that should be looked at. That's really the whole of the premise. I'm not saying we should all be doing heroin. I'm saying when we treat the drugs differently, the drugs treat us differently. We have a different interaction with them. The interaction that we have right now is punitive and criminal, is not good for us, and has proven to not be good for us. So to not have a discussion about how we can have a better relationship with drugs in our culture is irresponsible. To say that it's a stretch that we should talk about drugs is irresponsible because you're perpetuating harm.
Okay.
When you're looking at the information, you're perpetuating harm by not having the discussion that needs to be had.
The Bible says stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secrecy is more pleasant.
Yes.
Things are more enjoyable when you're not supposed to do them. That is why kink exists.
Yes.
Shayna says, addressing consequences is usually a huge part of decriminalization. You amp up treatment, you amp up clean needle exchanges, you amp up drug testing, as in making sure that you're actually taking a safe and pure version of the drug that you're trying to take. Harm reduction, you can't just have rampant legalization without harm reduction practices.
Yes.
I am not advocating
Hallelujah.
Preach.
Preach.
Amen. I am not just advocating that the U.S. just suddenly say, okay, everything's legal, go be free, you beautiful bastards. I am not saying that.
I am. And what she said.
I'm saying we should decriminalize what you do with your body while also enabling and educating you to treat yourself well and enforcing that you still don't have a right to harm anybody.
Right.
Help me, help you, help us all.
Right.
Shayna says, from a child welfare standpoint, you would just want to address the impact to the child and their ability to parent, which would be different for each person. I know several mommies on muscle relaxers and wine who are better mommies than they are without those things.
That's a different story than having the cops go to the school to teach the kids to knock out their parents for use.
Ugh. While lying to them about the substance.
While lying to them what they're doing.
Lots of people
Do you know how many stories there were of like kids saying, Mommy and Daddy are in danger because the smell is in their room, and they call the cops, and then they're in a damn foster home.
For the rest of their life.
Yeah, because Mommy and Daddy did something illegal, and the kid ratted them out, and they have to live with knowing that they killed their own parents. They took their own parents out of their life because they were manipulated by an authority figure.
You were
that
brainwashed.
That doesn't make a good voting citizen after that.
No, you were brainwashed to ruin your family life.
Yeah.
By your government.
That's a story that happened over and over and over.
We were talking about this with one of our beloved and long past, he's not dead, I just never get to see him anymore, bartenders.
Yeah.
And I miss all my bartenders.
You don't see any bartenders anymore.
I miss my bartenders. So we were having this conversation.
Addict.
Briefly with one of our bartenders about legalization and that what you do with your body should not be a crime. I mean, that's what freedom fighters are protesting for in Helena. What I do with my body should not be a crime. And what we say to them is, yes, but if your body doing whatever you want spreads coronavirus to somebody else's body, that's a problem.
Right.
You know, and that's the same conversation on the flip side about abortion. You know, what I do with my body should be my choice.
Right.
And with drugs,
right.
What I do with my body should be my choice. But if what you do with your body harms another being, that's a problem.
It's a discussion that should be had.
It's a problem, and it's a discussion. I forgot what I was saying.
Drugs.
I know we're talking about drugs. Shayna, Astrid, I don't know, the harm reduction thing.
So to me, this is not like a controversial topic.
Oh, we were talking about it with Sam. We were talking about it with our bartender, and he was like, no, because I know people who are addicted, and if it was easier for them to get the chemical, they would just die.
Well, that's like trying to plug a dam from the outside. That's there's going to be some transitional issues.
Yes.
From one system to another system. There was an issue when they criminalized pot because suddenly millions of Americans were criminals that had to be put in jail. I know it's uncomfortable, but we got to do it.
Oh, shucks.
Let's put millions of Americans in jail now.
And now we have so many jails that we have a hard time keeping them full, but a good thing marijuana is still illegal in most places.
So, yeah, there will be some casualties of the transition. What is worse? Casualties
Which sounds
of a transition,
like a heartless thing to say.
Casualties of a transition or the perpetuation of a racist, deadly, criminal empowering enterprise? What is worse?
Right.
Having some casualties in getting out of that, or just saying, let's not change that?
I was having some side conversations with Astrid before the show because I never quite know when she's going to be able to tune in because she's
right.
like in Sweden.
Yeah.
Astrid said she's reading a bit now about Norway. It's important is that they decriminalized using drugs but did not legalize narcotics.
Okay. Well, that's a step.
What are narcotics?
Drugs. Like, so narcotics would be cocaine. That would be...
How do you decriminalize using cocaine but not legalize cocaine?
That way, if you're caught with a little bit of the stuff, you're not who they're after.
Okay.
They're after the drug dealer. They're after the person that's peddling. They're after the person that's selling to people on the street.
Okay.
They're after the kingpin who's manipulating the local political policy because he has enough money and power by selling drugs to the thing to wreck the political system. That's what they're after, which should be dealt with. We created those entities here. John F. Kennedy was president of the United States. His dad rose to power as a bootlegger selling alcohol during Prohibition.
Okay.
So some of our, it's the same thing with a number of people. When the thing is illegal, power is accumulated, and we got a president out of an illegal bootlegger.
Right.
We got other presidents that have gotten rich off of pharmaceuticals, which is another drug pushing agenda. You know, talking about pharmaceuticals, talking about, if you want to talk about, what's the...
Yes, Susan said earlier, she's like, I want to talk about the opioid crisis and pharmaceuticals.
So, like, I have a really snarky version of that. Like, heroin came into this country more heavily with Vietnam because the CIA was importing it to fund black market operations that didn't show up in the congressional budget. When we went into Afghanistan, the first thing that we did was secure the opium fields in order to make money for certain people in Afghanistan to build alliances so they could grow heroin, and we'll make sure you get it out as long as you're our ally in Afghanistan.
This is historical fact.
Where does the heroin go? It suddenly, really good, clean heroin shows up all over the U.S. when we invade Afghanistan. So we created the addiction through black market, and then we invented, what's the drug? What's the heroin drug that everybody...
Opium?
Not
no.
It's the drug that it's the prescribed heroin. That somebody knows what that is. I did not know we could
take prescribed heroin.
It's basically the prescribed heroin. It's the drug that everybody's addicted to. That there were small towns, like there was a town in Oklahoma where there were prescriptions being filled for what's it called?
I'm looking. Prescription heroin works, according to a new review. Oxycodone.
Oxycodone.
Thank you, Shayna.
So there were little towns with a doctor who was prescribing enough oxycodone to supply 10 times the amount of the people that lived in the little town. That's a drug dealer.
Right.
And they've been sued. So the makers of oxycodone have been sued because they weren't just making a drug and making it available. They were giving incentives to doctors to make prescriptions. They were heroin pushers, but legally, and traded on the stock market. So yeah, that's a problem. But the conditions that make people want to be addicted. So it's not like the drug dealers. Like, so we had street heroin, then we have prescribed heroin. So now you can jail the people that help build your market and capitalize on the market that they built.
Both ends.
And as long as people are economically impoverished and poor and upset and broken and disenfranchised, you're going to have more addicts. So it's good to enforce policies that make sure that your addict base grows. And that's the nexus between the pharmaceutical problem in our U.S. government and fundraising problems between the donor class and the voter class.
Astrid and I were talking on the side before the show a lot because I'm really curious. She often pops onto the show and brings up how things are different in other countries. I think that's really important for us in the U.S. to remember because we're very U.S.-centric in the U.S. We kind of just only ever hear about the U.S. in the news unless something really horrible happens like Notre Dame burning up.
We're so sexy, though.
Like, we're hot stuff, and so all U.S. citizens kind of just always only hear about U.S. citizens and then forget that other countries have different experiences.
Right.
And I was just trying to figure out, like, after it's like they don't have an opioid problem in Sweden. They have problems with alcohol, but the government has made alcohol really expensive by putting a high tax on it, so it's harder to get. You know, like, she's just talking. I'm like, she's like, I'm pretty sure hardly anybody uses cannabis. They don't have medical marijuana. I'm like, how do you have people not really getting opioids, And also not really getting cannabis. Like, how are people getting pain relief?
Eli Lilly?
Post-surgery.
Yeah.
You know? And she's like, it's like doctors can't really write prescriptions for opioids. It's really hard to get a prescription for a painkiller. And so I'm like trying to suss things out, you know? All you can hope to do in life is develop theories about how things work and then go out and find out if your theories are correct or not. Because there's a lot of information and there are a lot of different perspectives. And so I'm kind of developing this theory about why does the US have an opioid crisis and other first world countries do not, you know? And my theory is that the US is really depressed. We're having a really bad time. We are one of the most broke countries on the planet.
Indebted. Yeah.
Super broke. Like
worse than broke.
80% of citizens make less than $40,000 a year in the US. We don't have health care when we need it. Education puts people in debt for the rest of their lives. You can't just work one job and pay for your living, your livelihood. Like, the US is having a really bad time. And so, plus it's really, really easy to get painkillers in the US. And so somebody goes in for a surgery for their knee and they're given painkillers and they can keep getting a prescription refill, but they are not offered chiropractic, acupuncture, therapy, or physical therapy.
No, let's
and your insurance
problem.
Definitely isn't going to cover chiropractic, acupuncture, therapy, or physical therapy after your surgery. Guess what? You're probably feeling like a piece of crap because you can't support your football team the way that you were supporting, and now everybody's kind of a little bit mad at you because you busted your knee and you're going to be out the rest of the season, and so you feel like crap, and so you're going to keep taking this escapism pill, even though you're not still in pain. And then when you can't get that anymore, you have to go find other escapism. It's, you know, like, and so I'm like trying to figure out, like, so does Sweden just have, and it kind of turns out like Sweden has really good aftercare. Like, you go in for a surgery and then they're going to put you in rehabilitation.
That's a part of the process.
Yeah. We're not just going to surgify you and then dump you back in the system. Like, in the US, we have this mindset that we all need to be tough. We need to man up. We got a Puritan work ethic. We got to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. Like, you had a knee surgery, you're fine. You can totally go back to work next week. How soon can I go back to work and be a good citizen?
Continue ranting and handle this question. I have to go.
Okay. So they're talking about methadone. Methadone is an opioid antagonist. Thank you, Roy and Shayna. Methadone is an opioid antagonist. What is an opioid antagonist? I would like to know. Astrid says they do have opioids in Sweden, but it's restricted for doctors not to write to anyone, reporting why they write and to whom. I mean, like, I have come to realize that I probably have undiagnosed ADHD and have for a long time. And that while I don't want to be a different person every day, some days when I'm trying to get stuff done and I can't concentrate, taking Adderall, like half of an Adderall, really helps me actually keep working on cleaning my office, rather than starting cleaning my office and then suddenly finding myself doing dishes 10 minutes later. So I'm trying to get a prescription for Adderall. I had to talk to a therapist and go through like 20 questions to figure out if I really have ADHD. She has to send that to my primary care physician, and they're going to have one of their therapists evaluate me to see if I really have ADHD. And then I'm going to have to fill out some forms to promise that I won't spread it around to anybody else, and to confirm that I won't abuse it, and to confirm that I understand if I run out of my prescription before a period of time, I can't get a refill. Like, it's super, 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 super hard to get Adderall, which is probably good. But other things are not so hard. Astrid says that is also a different perspective. Over here, if you decide to mess up your body, I have to pay for your treatment through taxes. So use the belt, go to rehabilitation. I'm not exactly sure what other perspective you're talking about, Astrid.
I'm not sure. What's the belt?
And what do you mean decide to mess up your body? I'm pretty sure nobody decides to go get a football injury.
I decided to keep smoking for 30 years.
So if you eventually get lung cancer, it'll be the taxpayer's burden to take care of you?
Yeah, and socialized medicine, yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know what use the belt means, but Shayna points out we also have very little preventative health care in the U.S.
True. No, well, half of the GDP of our country is the medical industry.
But it's not preventative. It's
No,
like,
it's fixing the problems that we create.
Our food pyramid still says you need 8 to 10 servings of grains every day. Stop eating carbohydrates. Eat a damn avocado. You don't need 8 to 10 servings of bread, grains, pastas, and etc. every day. If you are building your food pyramid on breads, grains, and pastas, that is why you are sick. Like, our food pyramid in this, like, this country's, what is it? What's the word? Touted.
Yeah.
Preached medical science says that you need lots of carbs. You know? You don't.
Well, there's an industry that was a part of that pyramid.
Yeah. It also, in the Industrial Revolution, it became a lot easier to keep people working factory jobs when you gave them lots of cheap bread.
When they were building the Egyptian pyramids, all you needed was onions and beer to live on the pyramid.
Shocking!
That's all you need.
You only, that's the best in health recommendations these days, is
onions and beer.
Onions and beer!
Keep moving them rocks.
She says, on the subject of you have the right to do what you want with your body and the seatbelt equals, the belt equals the seatbelt. Over here, if you decide to mess up your body, I have to pay for your treatment through my taxes, so use your seatbelt and go to rehabilitation.
Yes.
Yes?
Well, it's so it's hard to compare cultures.
Yeah, it's really hard because I think people in Europe are having a better time.
If we did things
in the US.
differently, we would have different effects, and there would be transitional effects, and that's the thing we always have to wade through. Is as Trump says, is the cure worse
than
and I would say no. Like, the cure for our situation right now is to start legalizing drugs. Now, even though I said everything should be legal, there are steps that are occurring. There are some towns that are saying we should legalize mushrooms. We should not penalize you for doing mushrooms. And we need to do that in order to see if mushrooms might help people with PTSD. It might help people with addictions.
We know it's helping people with PTSD, right. But it's taken
but we can't
decades.
Study. We can't study.
We can't study it.
So if we started to allow, let's say, non-biased clinical trials of mushrooms, of marijuana,
ketamine,
of LSD, of ketamine, of GHB, of all these various substances, of ecstasy, have people who are concerned with the health benefits, research the health benefits, maybe design some protocols, and if more people were using what shamans call our allies, our medicinal allies, or our plant allies. These are things that, animals who are not humans will often seek neurochemical changing substances, mushrooms, fermenting fruit. They don't just like, whoops, I ate a bunch of rotten apples. They go for the rotten apples.
They went and got drunk.
Right. Animals seek to augment and we should be able to have the freedom to do that. And I don't think that we just suddenly make everything legal. I think we should. But I think it's already happening where people are doing, there's a billboard for ketamine in Butte on the way to Walmart.
For ketamine therapy to treat PTSD.
Which is $3,000. Or suicide. So, like, you want to commit suicide, I guess I better come up with $3,000 to go get a therapy that will save my life. You're usually not thinking that way.
Yeah.
Ketamine is cheap. You could, if there was a prescribed therapy for the substance for people who were suicidal or people who were PTSD, and they could take treatment in their own home or within a group of loved ones or practitioners that knew what they were doing, then there would be less, perhaps, suicide. Versus people committing suicide through taking drugs that are illegal without guidance, without some study that shows you the application of the substance.
Right.
We don't have that. So, but we're having it. So now mushrooms are coming in, MDMA is coming in,
LSD,
ketamine is coming in. I don't know about LSD's a rough one because I think once we get to the point where we start studying LSD.
Well, I mean, I've read articles. I've read articles in my studies
there's a lot of black market
about a lady who microdosed on LSD for 6 months to help herself.
Microdosing is a whole other thing.
To help herself through a relationship crisis.
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, everything became clearer. She had clearer pathways. She had clearer understandings. She felt more connected to her children. It was easier for her to be present in the spite of the relationship crisis that she was going through. And she felt like she made a wiser choice in her relationship crisis than she would have if she had just been being reactionary out of fear, because her microdosing was helping her be present with herself and not be afraid of her own emotions.
Some of these drugs are like dynamite. Used in the right way can build roads. Used in the wrong way can bring down buildings.
I mean, like, we've got the meth Adderall conversation. Like, people are prescribed something to help them get work done that ruins other people's lives. Before I knew about other substances besides alcohol, because my family was super against anything. Like, my mom didn't even like me taking ibuprofen for my period cramps.
Right.
Every month it was a problem.
Suck it up.
Why are you taking so many? You're going to ruin your kidneys. It's not that bad. Just take a walk. I'm like, Mom, I feel like there are tiny trolls with pickaxes in my uterus. Like, I feel like my hips are exploding out of my body. Like,
God was just mad at you.
Yeah. Well, Eve shouldn't have eaten that apple.
That's right.
So I didn't really know about anything outside of ibuprofen, aspirin, and vitamin C, and everything in moderation. And so I used to use alcohol, and I use the word use. Like, I used to use alcohol to get stuff done. I would dumb myself down in order to focus on vacuuming because my ADHD was undiagnosed. My mom didn't want me to have a label because she felt like labels got used as excuses to not work. And so I would day drink while I was married so that I could just get some stuff done, because otherwise my brain was going so fast, I was highly distractible and I would just end up doing multiple things at once and never get anything done. And I'm really relieved to have the possibility ahead of me of a chemical that has been regulated, tested, and provided for me in the correct dosage in a pure form that will help me get stuff done without hurting my liver.
Right.
And without me waking up with headaches.
James Bryan says that his son lives in Colorado where mushrooms were just legalized. And there's a good control group.
Colorado is so on point.
So my point is, maybe we don't legalize everything all at once.
No.
Let's say we start with the ones that help you give insight into yourself.
Like, philosophically, everything should be legal.
Philosophically, everything should be legal. At this stage,
what you do to your body should be legal.
For a controlled landing from a disastrous plan, I think taking things like mushrooms, ecstasy, ketamine, doing some trials.
With help and education.
Having people take it under guidance towards a goal.
What you should and shouldn't mix.
Medicinal, solving emotional problems, solving these sort of mental problems that pharmaceuticals aren't solving, but only masking.
Right.
If we do that, we open the door for a more enlightened conversation about what these other substances may or may not be and what they are good or not good for. Our entire culture is, for better or for worse, oriented around Sigmund Freud's practice, which was designed around cocaine.
Sigmund Freud's therapeutic practices were oriented around cocaine use for therapy.
Snort this and tell me about your mother.
And
That's
you would.
How he did it. You snort that cocaine, you will start talking about your mother. So
and just keep going and going and going.
The whole Western psychological zeitgeist was built on the rantings of cocaine users, not necessarily abusers. People used cocaine.
Like I used alcohol.
Ranted and built a psychological theory. I think it's worth having some folks use some mushrooms and rant and help build another psychological theory, using some DMT in controlled settings with a program and seeing what zeitgeist comes out of that.
These things don't kill people.
No.
Coffee does not kill you. Too much coffee will give you a heart condition.
Nicotine will kill you.
Alcohol does not kill you. Too much alcohol will ruin your liver. Yeah. Nicotine does not kill you. Smoking a cigarette will not kill you. But if you smoke too many cigarettes, you might get killed by the nicotine.
I could take a pack of tobacco and extract the nicotine and put it in your coffee and kill you.
Slowly over time.
No. Like, you'll have a heart attack.
Oh, really?
Yeah, you can extract a pack of cigarettes, the nicotine from a pack of cigarettes, put it in a cup of coffee, and if that person is not discerning, will die.
Wow.
And that's something I can go, what, $7, $8, $12, whatever it is now.
We have to destigmatize this. We have to shift our brains a little bit. The difference between use and abuse. The slippery slope argument, the gateway drug mentality, the gateway behavior mentality, addiction as a symptom of an unhappy life. We have to talk about these things are not bad things. How they are used can be unhealthy or incorrect. Your behavior because of your use can be unhealthy or incorrect behavior, or your behavior because of your use can be healthy and more correct. My behavior when I take Adderall, when I use Adderall, is healthier and more correct because I get stuff done and I'm not depressed about my distraction. We have a lot of really great comments from Shayna, who is in the psychological profession, I think is the right word.
Yeah.
We have ASAM criteria in the US, and all treatment is pretty much based on that, and treatment is very minimal. ASAM is what dictates your level of care. It looks at your potential for withdrawal symptoms and how severe your withdrawal symptoms might be, other medical issues, and the impact to your social network, etc. So if someone comes in and they're drinking all day, every day, they're going to get a higher level of care, like detox. But if you've white-knuckled your way to having a week or two alcohol-free, you're not going to get as much help because you're no longer at a high risk of dying from the withdrawal from that chemical.
Right.
They're not going to help you as much, even though you might still need psychological help.
Right.
Astrid says, I have trouble thinking that the first thought in emotional relational problems is choosing a chemical instead of actually trying to talk about feelings and thoughts. And how about doing music to get into yourself? Shayna says,
Wait,
what?
Can I add something?
Yeah,
to
go
that?
ahead.
I would say it doesn't have to be exclusive. Is that for myself, in my past use, I have found that having a experience that is divergent from my regular plane of existence gave me insight.
Refreshing.
To change and to see the things that needed to be changed that I didn't have before. So this was not me partying on drugs. This was me using neurochemicals to see my life differently, to make adjustments that were required and were necessary and were beneficial. And music is great on drugs. Some drugs.
Music is kind of the same on caffeine.
Talk to any jazz musician.
But you sure think you're a better singer on alcohol.
Oh, right. But you will spend more time on your instrument on heroin.
More compositions came out of those composers.
Yeah.
Shayna says, I used to have to dictate level of care for people and call the insurance companies to justify why I picked how much help somebody should be getting. Basically, the insurance company wants you to pick the lowest level of care possible. Yes. They claim that it's for the well-being of the client because of that wonderful, biblical-based, Puritan work ethic, bullcrap argument that people should be pulling themselves up by their own bootstraps, and we don't want to enable people by helping them too much.
Bootstraps.
If you help someone too much, you are enabling them. That has got to go. Okay, Shayna keeps saying, the insurance companies claim it's for the well-being of the client, but really it's about their reimbursement.
Yeah.
It's very hard to get significant treatment.
Plus, also, if you don't help them all the way, they'll come back. You'll end up making more money over time than people that relapse and come back than people you cure.
Yeah. If you want to look into something very disturbing, look into the Susan G. Komen Foundation's fundraising for cancer research, and figure out what percentage of it goes towards figuring out how to keep people from getting cancer.
Probably not very much.
Less than 1% of 1% of all of the money raised for the Susan G. Komen Cancer Research Foundation goes towards figuring out how to keep people from getting cancer.
They're spreading awareness.
Nope.
Yeah, they're spreading awareness.
Nope. It's all about how to help you after you've gotten it.
Spreading awareness?
Nope. Go get
it's
your
like
mammograms.
Preachers. It's the same thing. It's the same model as preachers.
If you want to get real scared, go look up the correlatory side effect evidence of what mammograms do to your breasts.
Astrid says her fiddle fingers won't move the way she wants if she boozes.
If I booze.
Yeah.
That sounds like a song. My fiddle fingers won't move if I booze.
And the thing is, one thing that is really, this is another part of the discussion, and we're running out of time. We only have 6 minutes. Part of the discussion is in the field of marijuana, you have 2 different main differences in marijuana. You have a sativa or you have an indica. An indica tends to be more, one tends to be more head, one tends to be more body. One tends to make you relax, one tends to make you want to clean your house. However, it's not true. The one that makes you want to clean the house may make me want to go to bed. The one that makes me want to clean the house may make you want to go to bed.
Guess what? People are different.
People are different, and the drug interactions are different. So for some people, like I know all the famous writers are supposed to be alcoholics, and I can't write on booze.
Well, some people turn into...
So it affects people differently.
Some people turn into raging a-holes when they use alcohol, and some people turn into hilarious lovers when muffins when they use alcohol.
So when we get into the more nuanced stuff of psychedelics, when you're dealing with things like DMT, LSD, MDMA, when you start figuring out what those chemicals do, what parts of the brain they activate, the effects that they have on you, there are universal things, but then there are also highly individualized effects that need to be studied, I think, for the benefit of the species. It's like our friends 710 and 805, or what's his name?
710 and 805?
710 and 805 could probably tell us more factual details around, what was I just talking about? Drugs.
Well, yeah.
Details around, what was it? We'll get back to it later.
You were talking about how it's different for different people, sativas and indicas.
It's different for
uppers
different
and
people.
Downers. Like coffee, caffeine, because of my ADHD, caffeine makes me sleepy. I cannot drink caffeine and go on a road trip. People are different. Colorblind exists. People are different. Caffeine makes me sleepy. People are different.
Right.
Ooh.
I had a really great point, and we'll have to save it for next
Sorry,
week.
baby.
We're running out of time anyway.
Yeah. One of our viewers said, I hate booze, but after years of trying to treat some pretty severe trauma with talk therapy and legal prescribed medications that just gave me side effects but not any help, it was psychedelics that cured night terrors.
Right.
And that's often the case. Like there's legal, there are some places, including Montana, oddly enough, where it is legal to go and have safe, educated, regulated ketamine therapy with a trained practitioner who will administer this drug to you and then walk you through how to relieve yourself of uncurable PTSD trauma symptoms. Ketamine gives you a feeling that everything's going to be okay and that you're safe and that the only thing that's happening is right now you can relieve yourself finally for once from the past that you're just churning in. You're churning in the past, churning.
See,
and ketamine gives you that moment, that warm, sunny moment, to know that it's possible to feel okay again.
I have feelings that I would like to have cured through, I'm not sure what chemical will cure it, but I do have feelings around the use of these chemicals. So before LSD was made illegal, it was a substance that was being experimented with because it was not illegal. There's a wonderful book called The Politics of Ecstasy, which is about a number of studies, papers, rants, conversations that were happening pre-prohibition LSD after enough people had done it to figure out that there was something worth looking at. There were church organizations where the leaders of the church would drop acid and then say, this is what we've been trying to do with church.
We've been trying to get connected to God.
And we found a way to do it. So
this will help us get connected.
So there were like religious congregations and leaders of churches getting together saying, we found a way better sacrament, buddy. That conversation got killed. There were therapists that were trying to use LSD to treat alcoholism. And there were a number of great instances where people said, I will never touch the bottle again, and did not ever touch the bottle again after one trip. They didn't ever do LSD again either.
These are documented. This isn't a mommy blogger. This isn't a mommy blogger.
It's dramatic. It's dramatic. And the thing is that these substances, my feeling, is part of the reason they are illegal, is they're operating on a different premise than our current social, political, economic system is operating on.
Game theory.
If you start to do LSD, mushrooms, ketamine in a therapeutic way in order to better yourself, in order to heal from traumas, in order to broaden your perspective, you will start to have less faith in the system that is considered reality, which is just the majority accepted reality. It's a different paradigm. It's a different way of perceiving, and it threatens the old way of perceiving. Legalizing LSD, ketamine, MDMA, marijuana will be the downfall of our current socio-economic political system.
Which says you had better go out and get yours before somebody else takes yours.
So these drugs are not illegal for your safety. They are illegal for the safety of the system that is lying to you about what they do.
That needs you to be in competition with your neighbors in order for people to keep making money.
That is not a conspiracy theory. Go back and watch the last 2 hours and you will see that that is true. Do the research. Don't believe us. Read The Emperor Has No Clothes. Read Smoke and Mirrors. Do some, go to an incognito window and search some drug policy issues and not through the lens of your previous searches.
Right.
There's information you don't know and that has been obscured. That if you knew and you are pro-drug war, you would change your mind as a patriot, if nothing else.
Right. Yeah, I think it's oddly enough, of all of the things that Dark and I talk about on the show, this one is the easiest to research.
Oh, it's so easy.
This is the easiest way
because the propaganda is so big.
If you go and look this up, you will find out that your government brainwashed you, your parents, and your grandparents into thinking things are bad and people are bad who are not bad. So that hippies wouldn't stop the war. And white people could keep being better than minorities. It's so easy to find out.
We had a friend one time ask me why... I think it's funny that alcohol is also called spirits. Alcohol is interesting. It's also called spirits. It defines a paradigm. The 1800s, the 1900s, if you were going to do a business deal, if you're going to do a political deal, it was done over a highball.
Which is a type of drink?
It was done over some hard liquor. It wasn't done over beer. Wasn't done over a joint.
You were going to have a real drink and get down to business.
And you were going to drink until you hammered out a deal. And that was under the spirit of alcohol. They tried getting rid of that spirit. And all they did was criminalize a segment of the population and empower another part of the population that was going to undermine that prohibition. That's where we are now as well. There are people who are going to do these drugs because
whether they're legal or not.
Whether they're legal or not, because they're depressed or because they're inquisitive or because they have read actual research and want to know more about it, and they're not going to say, because they say it's illegal, I'm not going to do it. These substances have been around. They make cultures. All our cultures are based on one substance or another. It could be chocolate or it could be caffeine. It could be marijuana. It could be beer.
Coffee club culture, bar culture, brew pub culture.
The entire corporate culture would not have been possible without coffee.
Right.
So these substances move culture, and what's the line that if you want to know who controls you, pay attention who cannot be criticized?
If you want to know who your rulers are, figure out who you are not allowed to criticize.
So if you're not allowed to talk about drugs, if you're not allowed to talk about the medical application of illegal substances, the people who are making that difficult are the people that you should probably be looking at about why things are the way they are, and if you're not happy. So,
I feel like that was a really good show.
Top of the hour. We're done.
So grateful for everybody that participated.
I want to play a thing. I already put the link in.
You put the link in. Well, just share the link at the end of the comments, and then people can click away from our video to this link as your last hurrah for the afternoon.
I'll do it again.
Love you too, James. Thanks for tuning in.
I'm at the very end of the comments. I'm going to post this video. It is Nancy and Ronald Reagan on drugs.
We do understand this is a difficult subject. This is a painful subject because a lot of people have been hurt by substance abuse. But we should talk about it.
James Bryan said, loves us both. Can't wait till next time.
Oh.
Hey, thanks for playing, everybody. Yeah. Thanks for participating in the show. This show will air next week in this slot from 4 to 6 on America's Most Radio, KBMF 102.5, beatamerica.radio.org.
If you'd like to stay in touch with our next shows and upcoming topics, you can follow Post-Orthodoxy on Facebook. You can follow us on Instagram at Post-Orthodoxy. We also have a Post-Orthodoxy YouTube that has an archive of almost all of our videos, live streams.
A lot of them.
And we're working on making a Podbean account so that we can upload the old podcasts. We have to start all the way back from like August.
We have to upload so you can download.
Yeah, we want you guys to be able to hear everything all at once, even if you're on a road trip and not on Facebook.
Right.
Yeah.
So thanks for tuning in this week. I highly recommend the YouTube link that I did. It's one of my favorite videos of all time.
The video of Nancy and Ronald Reagan talking about drugs?
On drugs.
Right.
Thanks for tuning in. We're gonna go away now.
Yeah,
and I'm gonna watch this video. Should we watch it live? Should we just play it live? Or
yeah, we can play it live, and then we can stop the video.
Let's play
That's fine.
All right, so this is
Nancy and Ronald Reagan on drugs.
And Ronald Reagan on drugs.
Nancy's joining me because the message this evening is not my message, but ours. Despite our best efforts, shortages of marijuana are now being reported.
Shortages?
From the early days of our administration, Nancy has been using marijuana on a daily basis, and her personal observations and efforts have given her such dramatic insights that I wanted her to share them with you this evening. Nancy?
Thank you. For 5 years, I've been traveling across the country, learning and listening, and one of the most hopeful signs I've seen is this new drug, crack. Each time I meet with someone new, I yearn to find a way to help share the message that drugs open your eyes to life, to see it in the vivid colors that God gave us as a precious gift to his children.
I think you can see why Nancy has been such a positive influence on all that we're trying to do. The job ahead of us is very clear. Nancy's personal crusade to expand the use of smokable cocaine, otherwise known as crack, should become our national crusade.
Our young people are helping us lead the way. Long ago in Oakland, California, I was asked by a group of children what to do if they were offered drugs. Say yes, I answered. Soon after that, those children in Oakland formed a Just Say Yes club. And now, there are over 10,000 such clubs all over the country.
Drugs are the mightiest force for good that we know.
Many of you may be thinking, well, drugs don't concern me. But it does concern you. It concerns us all because of the way it could fulfill the promise and hope in those restless minds. Drug and alcohol abuse needs our encouragement.
In this crusade, let us not forget who we are. Drug abuse is a freedom that is ours. You are Americans. You're the product of the freest society mankind has ever known. No one ever has the right to separate the drugs from the customer.
Say yes to drugs to the point of making others uncomfortable.
And drug abuse is not a crime.
Drugs help us create love and hope and trust and confidence. and the cocaine makes me happy.
Think for a moment how special it is to be an American. The revolution out of which our liberty was conceived signaled an historical call to substance abusers and the chemically dependent.
It's up to us to change attitudes and just simply enjoy life to the fullest with a cocaine habit.
And in the most important area, individual use, we see progress. The U.S. military has more than tripled the use of drugs among its personnel since 1980.
Oh, too
Tonight,
soon.
I can report to you that Vice President Bush smoked marijuana regularly. And there's one more thing. Nancy and I are hooked on heroin.
Each of us was once strung out on several drugs.
Here in the White House, drugs are a constant temptation, but we still have much to do. Our goal is to expand drug trafficking at all levels of government and in the private sector. Help us.
Now we go on to the next stop, making a final commitment. Say yes to drugs anytime, any place. So won't you join us in this great new national crusade?
God bless you. Good night.